Hey, it's Andrea. Today, Guinan gives life-saving advice. Nobody takes that advice. And we ask the question, why didn't anybody listen to Guinan? Stay tuned to find out.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Today we're talking Season 2, Episode 16, entitled Q Who. This episode was written by Maurice Hurley and directed by Rob Bowman. So this is a really fun one. And also scary. Q returns, commandeering Picard in a shuttlecraft. Warning the captain of human complacency, the omnipotent super being transports the Enterprise to the deepest recesses of the galaxy. There, they encounter the unstoppable cybernetic super race known as the Borg, who slowly begin disassembling the Enterprise with their superior technology. Shereese, this is probably the biggest we've hit so far. Do you have any initial thoughts?
Yes, it was very cool to see the Borg. And I know you talked about how at the end of season 1, we had all those colonies that were being scooped up, and they kind of reference it in this episode as well. And you said that originally that's when the Borg were supposed to kind of show up. But for whatever reasons, technical glitches, writer strikes, all of that, we did not see the Borg. And instead, we just saw the Romulans being like, we're back. And that's it. And it was really dumb.
Right?
I have to say, it was 100% worth the wait. The Borg are so terrifying and such fantastic villains. They put the Ferengi to shame as villains. So it was really, really cool seeing them. And it just made my little steampunk heart so happy.
Oh my God. Yes. It was so like steampunky, cyberpunk. I fucking loved this episode. When I knew we were going to review it, I was like, oh, it's so good. And then in watching it, I had to pause every 5 minutes to be like, oh, and this, oh my God, and that too. Like, there's just so many great moments. I am the biggest like Q fan. So when he's around, I'm always tickled. This, I will say, as much as I love Q, the 2 other times that we've seen him in the pilot, which was just a hot mess, and then in Hide and Q, which was also just really dumb. Like
another hot mess part 2.
Yeah, it was hot. Was hot mess part 2. We didn't really get to see him be his true Q self, and this is where I feel like now we're really getting into Q as like he's gonna fuck with you just to fuck with you, and it's scary, and he's just it's like a cat and a mouse type of thing. But the other thing too I thought about this episode was this is where TNG really steps out of like the original series' shadow and like now is like its own powerhouse because of this episode. I think like this is truly where, season 1 was like WTF. And then season 2 was like, this one was good. This one wasn't great. This one was good. But now in Q Who, it's like, oh, this is okay. Now we've really hit like a whole new level.
Yeah, I agree. I think having the Borg alone is what sets them apart because all of season 1 was, the first half of it was literally copying the same exact storylines from the original series. So Borg is like brand new. We're not doing Klingons or Romulans. This is brand new.
Yes. Okay. So I do have some information about how they came up with the Borg. So they needed a new villain and they're like, okay, we've done the Ferengi and that was a big like faceplant. It's just too comical to be taken seriously. So the writer, Maurice Hurley, really took the reins on this and he came up with the idea of this like insectoid race that has a hive mind, but they had some budgetary constraints. So they couldn't end up doing like the insect type aliens. So they came up with this like cyberpunk humanoids, but who still retain that hive mind. And I feel like the hive mind is what makes it like a really terrifying race to deal with.
And I also have to say that having people with cybernetic implants to me feels, it's very Terminator, of course, but to me, it feels a lot scarier than if it was a giant roach, right? Because we saw that in like, what was in Men in Black where we had like the giant roach monster. And it's like, it was scary until it kind of unveiled itself. And you're like, oh, it's a giant roach.
Yeah.
And then it's just like weird or like funny or like it kind of loses something. But to have it just be people with a little bit of extra. Yeah. You're like, okay, because people are always scary, I think.
Yes. And we, in The Big Goodbye, they tried to make that race that Picard has to like address perfectly as like an insectoid race as well. But again, they had budgetary constraints, which I'm really glad. Like, I'm glad we don't see like Hornet people running around or whatever. Like,
seriously,
that just doesn't seem very cool. So this episode went over budget by 1 day, and that 1 day cost a mere $50,000 for them to go over budget. They also went over budget in Elementary Dear Data, which is another episode we totally love. And because they went over budget so many times in season 2, that's why they ended up with the season 2 finale, Shades of Grey, which was basically just like a clip show. Because they're like, oh, we don't have any more money.
The entire episode was just Riker laying in bed, and that's the whole episode.
And reliving memories that we already saw in season 1 and 2.
Well, you know what? It was worth it to get this episode and to get that other one.
It was totally worth it. So the Borg, in my opinion, scariest villains out there, would go on to appear in more episodes of TNG, as well as Star Trek First Contact, the pilot episode of Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Enterprise, and in and out of Voyager. So they really they really did make like a big impact.
Yeah. I mean, a former Borg drone joins the Voyager crew. So, I mean, they really take it to another level. And she comes back in Picard, which is our latest reboot of the TNG world. So yeah, Borg are very long lasting. They're an incredibly effective villain.
Yeah, they really, really are. Okay, let's jump right in. So can we, I normally write like 2 pages of notes. I have like 5 for this episode. There's so many things going on.
You might need to pick and choose. We might need to be really careful.
Let's just start off the very beginning of the episode as we see a new character, and Sonia Gomez orders a hot chocolate. And already I can't stand her. Already. Yes. Okay. So this woman, the actress's name, and I hope I'm not butchering it, but Lycia Nath, she was introduced as this overeager young ensign, Sonia Gomez, and she was intended to be a recurring character in the same manner as Chief O'Brien. And we already know how I feel about Chief O'Brien. They just shoehorn him in everywhere. The last thing we needed was like an actually person be like, actually, like, no, Wesley's already taken that role, and Chief O'Brien is already popping in and out of places he has no business being. So I'm so glad they didn't keep her around. Also, poor Geordi constantly in this series
saddled with some weirdos, right?
Not only that, but he has to he's gotten the poker face down perfectly, where like he's in the middle of a job, it's usually urgent, and then you've got somebody talking about non-work related things, and I'm looking at you, Wesley Crusher, as he's in the middle of just like doing a job. Like, leave him alone. He is literally the busiest man on the ship. Go talk to anybody else about your like girl problems or whatever.
Or anything else. Well, what I loved about this scene when we open up with Sonia Gomez, who I desperately want to call Selena Gomez. When we open up with Sonia Gomez, my first thought was, wait a minute, you can make hot chocolate in the hallways? Why did we never see this again? Absolutely. And then she like turns the corner and she's in engineering. And I was like, wait a minute. I mean, so many moments. I guess this is like the vending machine in your department or whatever, but I don't remember seeing this before or after, where people are just like whipping up some hot chocolate. And then I love how Geordi's just like, do you really think you should have a hot chocolate next to all these buttons and panels? And she's like, yeah, maybe not. I was like, oh yeah, you know what? That's why we don't see people making hot chocolate, because that's not appropriate.
You know what? I am the classic ADHD like spiller. So I will order next to main engineering some like chicken chow mein and then get noodles all over the panel. And that's why you don't do that. That's exactly why. So as Geordi's like, hey, maybe, you shouldn't have this in here, she turns around and goes smack into Captain Picard and spills her hot chocolate all over him. And then tries to wipe it off using her bare hands?
That was the weirdest thing. I was like, can you stop touching my abdomen? Strange person I don't know. That was so uncomfortable for me. I was just like, this is weird. Your hands are not actually towels. You're not drying anything. You're just like caressing his stomach, and it's just weird. You need to like take a step back, synthesize a napkin or something. Like, weird.
I wrote 2 things. I wrote, number 1, I'm jealous because I would like to rub Patrick Stewart's abdomen. But also, Shereese is dying. Number 2.
This is why he won't come on our show. Comments like that.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Patrick Stewart. But number two, she was just assigned to the Enterprise, and now she's going to be reassigned to the USS fucking nobody because of shit like this. Get out of here, Sonia Gomez.
What I love is how Geordi immediately takes responsibility as a good leader, even though you're like, there is no way that could be your fault. I mean, I guess maybe letting her have the hot chocolate in the first place, maybe, but like she turned around, she accidentally spilled it, like it was an accident. And then for Geordi to be like, this is 100% my fault. It was like, I really admired that. And at the same time, it was like, no, it's 100% her fault. Like, it's really not. But then I love how Picard's just like, it is, you're right. Because like, you're in charge here. I'm going to go change. You know, it's just like, I don't know. I like that that they don't throw each other under the bus. I do like that.
I like that as well. I did think that Geordi apologizing so profusely for Sonia just being like clumsy and spilling her hot cocoa was like, you probably don't have to take as much responsibility. He's like, here, cut off my hand. I'm really sorry she did that. It's like, Geordi, it's probably, that's one I'm sorry is probably enough, but whatever, that's fine. So here's where things really start to kick off though. Picard goes to his quarters to change, steps onto the turbolift. And when he steps off the turbolift, he's in a shuttlecraft and it's piloted by Q, which of course my mind exploded with happiness. But also I thought, don't you look where you're going when you step off an elevator? I think I would notice if this isn't a hallway. It's like, wait.
Well, normally, but he was distracted by looking at all the hot chocolate on his stomach. So that's why he walked out like that. Normally, yes, of course, you're staring. And then he probably still would have stepped out, even if he saw it, because he would have been like, what is this? What's going on? Yeah. So I think either way, he would have ended up in Q's clutches one way or another.
That's true. Q will make him do whatever he wants. So he's in this shuttle bay and suddenly it cuts to credits and you're like, oh shit, this is a Q episode and he's just been kidnapped and this is amazing. Like, I'm just loving everything about it. Meanwhile, Geordi is taking Sonia to what I call chill the F out in 10 forward. And one of our key players, and I wish that Chris French was on this with us right now because he's a big Guinan fan. We see Guinan and she's having some heebie-jeebies in 10 forward. And she is the perfect person for that role where she's just like sensing, you know, Troy can sense things, but she's usually just like fear, sadness. Like Guinan is like, I'm sensing something bigger, just something way bigger here.
It's like Guinan can feel a disturbance in the force. Like it's different. It's a different kind of sensing going on. You like that Star Wars crossover? I know you did.
We're about to get canceled.
People are gonna be like, what? I know. Yeah. And so I love that. And I feel like I haven't seen Guinan since episode 1 of this season. I'm sure she's been in before, but I just feel like I haven't seen her in so long. It was so exciting to see her again. I'm like, yes, it's Guinan. And then she kind of, comm badges up to the bridge to say like, is everything okay? Because she's feeling something's wrong. And my first thought was, oh, apparently you can use the data pad to be a comm badge too. That's okay. That's a new way to like communicate with other people. And then Troy immediately like grabs that little spinny thing on the bridge to try to find Picard. And she's like, Troy to Picard or bridge to Picard or whatever. And I was like, that's a comm badge too? I think wow.
Anything can be a comm badge, honestly, on the Enterprise, because
apparently
if you look at like even the panels, remember the panels like in the hallways, that can be comm badges.
Those things are comm badges.
Yeah. So everything is just sort of hardwired to like be able to do everything.
Right. So my question is, why don't they use their comm badges? I don't get it.
That's true.
I just don't get it. But anywho,
that's true.
That's what I know. First, I was like, it's Guinan, and then I was like, huh? I don't get it.
Well, Guinan does not have a comm badge though.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Okay. So she does use use the little panel. Yeah, Troy does. So there's no explaining Troy, but there hardly ever is. So we don't care about Troy in season 2. But I love how mysterious Guinan is. She says like, is everything okay? But nothing seems out of order for the bridge crew. And then again, when Geordi is talking to Sonia, he asks Guinan if everything is all right. And she's like, I don't know. And this is something I really love about Geordi. Geordi's like, you know what? I'm just going to head to main engineering and double check on everything. And Geordi, in my mind, is the classic friend in the story who believes that unbelievable thing that's happened and is willing to trust that person isn't crazy. You know what I mean? Like Spider-Man gets bitten by a radioactive spider and he's got the one friend who's going to believe him and be his ally. And that's what Geordi is here, where he's like, I'm not going to ask any further questions. I'm just going to get to my station and just your whim is like good enough for me, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I love that too. And then Sonia's like, I'll come with you. And I was kind of like, no, maybe you should stay. Cause I feel like You're going to distract Geordi from trying to save the bridge. Yeah, drink your hot chocolate here. This is a good place
in
for
a
hot
sippy
chocolate.
cup. In a sippy cup, okay? And then we're going to put in your transfer orders to the USS Nobody because we don't really need you around.
I do like that we had a Hispanic woman, though. It would have been nice to have her longer. And for them to change her character to make her less annoying, which I'm sure she would have become over time. But
they do have her on in one other episode, which I don't remember which one it was. I think it might be in the next episode or two, and then they just kind of phased her out. So yeah, you're right. As a Hispanic woman, I'm like, yay, representation. And boo, you made her super annoying. So, but whatever. So, okay. So here's the real meat. Picard is trapped in the shuttle bay or in the shuttlecraft with Q, who's refusing to like let him go or let him leave. They're a zillion miles away from the Enterprise, so the Enterprise will never find them. Mm-hmm. And I love that Picard is just sitting there with his arms crossed like a petulant, pouty child being like, no, I'm not going to talk to you. Harumph. He kind of harumphs him.
He's smart, though. I'm not playing your game is the only way to get Q to like change, right? If you give in to him, he's just like, ha ha ha, what else can I make you do?
That's true. That's true. Picard is good at not negotiating with terrorists, and Q is just a very charming terrorist, I guess. So he's not having any of the nonsense, demands to be returned to the Enterprise, but Q's like, well, will you listen to my request? And he's like, fine. Suddenly they're in 10 forward. Here's a couple things. One, Guinan is just chilling like under the bar. Was she taking a nap?
Everyone else has disappeared. So I think Q has like poofed everybody else away who was in 10 forward. I don't know where he put them, but there was a whole bunch of people in 10 forward when Geordi was there. And now suddenly it's empty. And it's almost like his magic worked on everybody except for Guinan. Like she's the only one who didn't relocate on the ship instantly with his powers. Like he couldn't affect her. And even when they saw each other, they did that like cat stare at each other like, oh yeah, I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you. So that's what I think is what happened is somehow she just was like immune to the poofing power. Why was she crouched behind the bar and not just like standing next to the window like she was 2 minutes ago? I don't know.
I just figured she was napping next to the synthahol, like under the bar. I was like, oh, there you are, Guinan. Okay. So a couple of things about Guinan, which I freaking love Q versus Guinan. One, we learned that she and Q have had some dealings in the past. She's at least 2 centuries old because that's how long ago they had those dealings. And she's gone by other names. And I freaking love how John Delancey, as Q says, Guinan. Is that the name you're going by now? And I was like, oh my God, like there were other names. Like what? Like I just want a Guinan backstory so badly.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
I don't. I remember that from the episode. But I don't remember before rewatching this episode that statement that Guinan had gone by other names, which makes sense if she's lived for so many centuries, she gets to reinvent herself every 100 years or so. Like why not? But like, I didn't remember that about her character at all.
She's basically Madonna with the reinvention, but so much better. Yeah. So Q is like, let me zap her off the bridge or zap her off the ship. And I love that Guinan kind of does this sort of cat claw thing, which I'm insinuating means she's got some sort of magic against Q or she's got some sort of power against him. And so now they're kind of in this standoff. And Q says he's bored. He wants to join the crew of the Enterprise. And he offers his like infinite knowledge. And Picard offers this beautiful line. He says, to learn about you is provocative, but you're next of kin to chaos. I was like, oh, this kind of writing is what makes this episode so good for me.
It's very poetic.
It really is.
Picard has a couple of really epic one-liners going on here.
Oh my God, absolutely. So Q, of course, is, in his terrible twos. And he's like, okay, well, you're not ready for what's out there. And Picard and Riker are like, we don't need your help, which maybe don't tell that to an omnipotent superpower being like, I don't need your help. Maybe don't do that. So Q, of course, gets pissed and snaps them 7,000 light years away to the J25 system. And at maximum warp, it'll take over 2 years to reach the nearest starbase. And Q is like, toodles, just snaps himself away. He's like, see what you can do with this.
Which, originally it sounds like, like when you read the intro at the beginning, and it was just like, they're in the furthest reaches of space. It's going to take them, over 2 years to get back. That does sound super far. until I think about Voyager, which of course was not written at all at this time. It wasn't written for many, many years after this. But like they were put in the Delta Quadrant where they were over 70 years away. Yeah. So I was like, 2 years doesn't sound so bad. Like being such a fan of Voyager, I'm like, well, they could make it. Like all their friends and family will still be alive by the time they get back. Yeah. But yeah, true. I could see how that'd be scary. The thing that got me was when they realized like, oh my gosh, we're so far away. Picard was just like, well, since we're here, let's do some exploring. I was like, what?
This is what I love. Picard and Riker do what is cinematically the best double lean in to Guinan at the bar and go, your people have been in this part of the galaxy. What should we do? And she says, if I were you, I'd start back now. And God damn it, if Guinan tells you to turn around, you turn this ship around and you go at maximum warp. Don't go poking around, you guys. She's trying to tell you this is a bad idea. This is the Guinan episode, and nobody listened to her. I mean, they took information that was pertinent, but like she repeatedly warned them, like, we need to get the hell out of here. And they're like, well, you know, what's 10 more minutes of poking around going to do? And then we see what happens. Are you crazy? Don't ignore Guinan's warnings. Just don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just felt like that was a really bad call. But you know what? It kind of lines up with their bad calls whenever it comes to security, right? It's like something terrible security. I know. Let's send Picard. What? It's just like when it comes to their safety, or Wesley, right?
God damn it. Always sending Wesley. Geordi for some reason too. Aren't you the chief engineer by now? You have to be cleaning up hot cocoa from panels. You don't have time to be neutralizing threats.
O'Brien, for crying out loud. Yeah. So whenever it comes to their own safety, they are just notorious for making terrible life decisions. This is one of those. Although I'm sure it was unavoidable because Q could just, snap his fingers and do whatever he wants. But Guinan's telling them like, let's turn around. And they're like, we'll poke around a bit and then maybe we'll head out.
Yes. So they're poking around and they find this M-class planet. And it seems like some force has just scooped away the entire civilization and all the like mechanical portions of this planet. And so it references that strange phenomenon they encountered in the neutral zone at the end of season 1. And if you remember, the end of season 1 was supposed to be where we meet the Borg, but the Writers Guild of America was on strike. And so this like 2 or 3 part like season finale got cut to 1. So then they had to cut the Borg and they just made it the Romulans, and they made the like scooping away of technology just like a mystery that nobody could solve. They're like, maybe we'll see this later. So now it's making more sense because we see a ship scans them and moves to intercept, and it is cube shaped. Never seen that before. It has no bridge, no command center, no engineering center, no life science, no living quarters, and no shields or weapons of any known design. So you're like, what is this thing? Is it alive? Like, what is this? Guinan, meanwhile, is like, oh, I've been here before. I know exactly what this is. So Picard says, hey, can you go activate your view screen? And we see her walk out of 10 forward into an office. And I'm like, oh, good for you, Guinan. You have a little office.
Yeah. Or maybe that's her quarters. Maybe that's her home and she happens to live right across the hall from 10 forward.
I'd be kind of bummed about that. I would want like quarters somewhere I would want to commute to my job.
You might not love your job as much as Guinan loves her job. So that may make a difference.
That's true. I guess that's true. But to be honest, we are recording this in the midst of a pandemic. So I do work from home as a teacher for the most part. So I guess my commute literally is like about as long as Guinan's is now. Yep. It's down the hall. So whatever.
And it's pretty awesome. Yeah. So I feel like when Guinan looks at her view screen, she's just oddly calm. She's just like, oh yes, they're called the Borg. But later on, we find out that the Borg destroyed her people and scattered them to the winds, metaphorically speaking, scattered them all over the galaxy for whoever was left, whoever escaped, whoever happened to not be there like her. And I was just like, I mean, maybe that's because she's evolved and she's been around for centuries and all this stuff. But I was just like, that's a very calm reaction to seeing like the creatures that destroyed every person you know and love, and all of your people and your planet and everything.
Right. Well, Guinan, though, is not the type of person to be driven to hysterics easily. I don't think I've ever seen her in hysterics.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't picturing hysterics, but I was picturing emotion, like of some kind. Could be anger, could be fear, could be worry,
Yeah.
could be
Yeah.
something. She was just like, oh yes, they're called the Borg. They murder everything and everyone in their path. Next
Yeah.
question. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like she was taking an order at the bar.
Also, by the way, she goes to her office to look at the Borg ship on the view screen, but she was literally sitting at the window of 10 forward and getting like a real view with her own eyeballs. I was like, why would you need her to move? But okay, whatever. We're just going to gloss over that. So Geordi finally is getting some work done in engineering, and a Borg forward recon drone comes onto engineering and just starts fucking around with the controls. And they send a security team down. And of course, Picard has to be down there because when there's a security threat, you want the captain to be potentially in the line of fire. That's exactly what you want. And the
first, by the way, you want him to be in the very front leading the charge because that makes the most sense. You want Picard first, then Worf, then 2 random extras who stay at the door.
Yes.
Yep. That's what you want.
Yes. Yes. So one of the ensigns tries to stop him and he gets tossed like a rag doll. Worf fires on him and it does absolutely nothing to this Borg drone. And one of the things that I noticed was after that happens, he gets shot at. It doesn't affect him. He then takes his really cool controls. By the way, we need to talk about the costume design of the Borg. It is so effing amazing. But he takes his control panel and starts zapping the like engineering panel even harder and like looking dead at Picard. And I was like, dang, passive aggressive much? It was like, right? Zap, zap, zap. Like, oh,
he's like, try me. You just shot me and I'm still taking the knowledge that I want.
So finally, Worf kills him. But another one comes, and when they try to shoot at him again, he's got shields. And that's when I said again, it's time to get out of here because they're adapting faster than you can adapt. Like, you need to just like try to kill this one, beam him into space, and get the fuck out of here. This is a very bad idea. But the second Borg, finishes his scan of the ship, harvests some pieces from the dead Borg, and then they're both beamed away. And here's something that really bothered me. It leaves a Borg-shaped stain on the carpet. Did you notice that?
I did not notice that. Do they even have a carpet in engineering? Why do they have a carpet?
Yeah, I have so many questions. One, why would he leave a stain? Who's going to clean that up? Do they have extra carpet lying around so they can color match it? Is there a janitorial team? Seems like security now has a
janitorial team. I'm sure they just synthesize whatever carpet color, everything they need. I'm sure it's not that hard.
I mean, I'm sure they can just replicate it, but I was like, is there somewhere in a cargo bay just rolls and rolls of carpet just in case there's a spill? Because it seems like security now has to pull
Borg juice or who knows what.
Security now has to pull carpet detail. That's why security sucks so bad because half the time they're doing like janitorial work and then the other half they're doing security work. So I guess that's why. Anyway, yeah, it bothered me the first time I saw this episode in '89, and it bothers me today when that Borg is killed and beamed away. There's an effing Borg body stain on the carpet.
I missed that. I missed that stain.
Oh my God.
But I did. When he was like harvesting the parts of the Borg that was dead, like the or the one that was down, and I was kind of like, wait, I thought the Borg collected their technology, and then when they both beamed away, I was like, oh, okay, well then I don't know the point of that. Like he could have pulled that stuff off back on the ship. Like I don't know why that happened, but I guess they were just trying to show for the audience's point of view that this is how the Borg act. They're very unemotional when one of them dies. They just are kind of like, all right, I'll just take this and this and this and on with my day.
Yeah.
Which is scary because again, it's like completely unemotional. They're just like machines. They're killing machines if they want to be killers and they could care less about it.
Yes. They're totally cold and calculated. And that's the antithesis of like what we define the human spirit as. So it's like even scarier that you're like, I'm dealing with something I have no common ground with at all. And that is pretty terrifying. So they beam off the ship and go back to the cube. And now we have a conference with Guinan in the observation lounge. And I love an observation lounge scene because I love that room. But she kind of gives them the breakdown. She's like, listen, the Borg swarmed through my system and scattered my people throughout the galaxy. There are hardly any left. There's no reasoning with them. They don't want to have like diplomatic relations. They're not interested in like lust or power or money or anything. Like you are just raw material for them to be harvested. And then Troy is helpful here. And she's like, they have a hive mind. It's a collective people, which is way scarier because a single leader can make a mistake, but all of them together, like that's again, like we're just ratcheting up like how scary the Borg are. And I love how scary they are. They're just so terrifying. Can we talk about their costumes for a second?
Sure.
Amazing. That's all I have to say. Just amazing.
And I second that. Yeah, that's all I have to say too. I mean, the costumes are so cool. Like I am such a big fan of all the monster makeup on the show when it doesn't suck, which in season 1, there were a few moments where we were like, oof. But then there were other moments where I was like, wow. And this is one of those wow moments. I mean, especially because they're pretty much just all painted white with bald caps on. They're not like, looking like sea creatures or anything else. It's just, they're kind of just corpses. They're kind of just zombies.
Yes.
But adding all that tech, like there was one guy when they beam over to the ship in the away team, which we'll get to in a second, which why the F did they do that? But whatever. They beam over and there's one guy walking away and he has like, just like a coil on his back of piping or whatever. And it just kind of coils back and forth. It doesn't really have a purpose or a function, but it looks so cool. Yes. And I'm like, how fun was this just to kind of take wire and piping and whatever, and just kind of coil it and wrap it and stick it in people's eyes and swirl it around their heads. And just like, I don't know. It just looks very, very cool. And then in their like metallic ship with all the little buttons and knobs, I loved everything about it.
Yes, the set design and set decorating on the Borg ship just blew my mind. And I am such a set decorating nerd that I geek out about that kind of stuff all the time. That's like a dream job. One day, maybe I'll have. But not only that, but the costumes themselves, the way that they integrated all the like tubing and everything onto the actors. And then I did a little research on how they came up with these costumes. I'm really psyched to find out that the main costume designer who created the look for the Borg is a woman costume designer. And there was a lot of back and forth. Maurice Hurley was like, look, I want them to look cyberpunky and like, humanoid, but with all these like artificial portions to it. And he really dug his heels in hard and fought for her vision, which was the Borg look that we got. And there was so much like arguing and fighting behind the scenes because a lot of the like producers and writers were like, this is too dark. It's too scary. The original series is kind of campy. We've got some Klingons and some Vulcans, but they're not like this dark. And even Patrick Stewart was like, we need to be taken seriously. We can't be having like monsters running around. And then when they had the finished product, everybody was like, you know what? You're right. This was amazing. I'm really glad we stuck with this vision and followed it through, because what we got was this white painted, like dead zombie people with like artificial parts. And then as we get further into like getting to know the Borg in other episodes, they start having the holographic thing over their eye. Oh my God. I want one of those. I don't know what for, but I want one. So here's getting back onto it. The Borg have locked on the ship with a tractor beam. And then they've used a laser drill to cut a piece out of the Enterprise. And when I heard laser drill, I thought, oh, they probably assimilated that from the terraforming station on home soil. One that almost killed Data. The Borg got there, assimilated that laser drill, and they were on their way.
And not the laser drill again. Yeah, so they do that, and they take a cross section of the ship, and they just like rip it right out of the Enterprise. And I was like, but why? Do your scanners not work? Did you already scan all of this stuff? And don't you already know what's there? What's the point of like taking a chunk into your that just felt so like unnecessary. But I guess maybe it's to show the strength and the power of the Borg. I'm not sure. But I thought that cross-section piece didn't make sense.
I couldn't agree with you more. I thought, one, those effects were cool then and still look amazing now. But two, why cut away a piece of the ship? They've already gathered and analyzed all the information they need. They've already messaged Picard to say, we've analyzed your technology. It's inferior to ours. So if you try to defend yourself, you'll be punished. Like, you don't need to cut a piece of the ship. It's like cutting a lock of a celebrity's hair and being like, I got a piece of so-and-so's hair. It's like, why though?
When you have them trapped in your dungeon. That's what it's like. And it's like, well, you have all of them. I don't know if you need the lock of hair. You've got the whole thing right here. So whatever, they do that. And then Picard's just like, whatever it takes, break that tractor beam, like fire whatever you need, fire wherever you need. Like, I'm not even going to give you any orders anymore. Just figure it out and get that thing off of us. So they do. They start blasting away at the ship, and you get these 3 big holes that show up in the Borg cube, and the tractor beam finally goes off. And I was like, oh man, they're free. Get out of there. And what do? They go, well, looks like we've the ship's not moving, and they don't have any life signs. So let's take an away team there. What?
You know what they do? No, before they do that, they go, okay, 18 people have died. And Picard's like, you know what we need is another conference in the observation lounge. You've seen what you can do. They hardly seem to even be trying, and they're fucking you up bad. Okay. Picard is like the person in the horror movie that runs into the basement with no escape when the killer is on the loose. He's like, everybody into the basement. We'll hide here. Right. They'll never find us.
That fool. He's that fool. The door opens in the back, and he's like, well, let's lock it for now. We can use it later. No, get out of there.
Get out of there. So they ask Guinan, like, is there anything else you can tell us about the Borg? And I was going to be Guinan's like anger interpreter and be like, assholes, I already told you to turn back ASAP. What more do you need to know? What more do you need to know? Get out of here. This is a bad idea. And then Q pops up and he's like, told you so. Like, they've identified the Enterprise as something they can use, and they will take it. And they're not interested in friendly contact or political conquest. They don't want anything from you except your technology, and they'll kill you. And then they're going to assimilate you, and you will be like them.
Yeah. And I think at this point, we don't even know what assimilation is yet. We just know that they will destroy you somehow. Right. Because they're not even using the term assimilation yet. So
that's
just
true.
Like, so you don't even know what's going to happen to you, but you will be no more.
Yeah.
So Guinan's like, all I have to say is get the heck out of here. To which Riker responds, well, I mean, this is going to be like our only chance to really investigate. And like, we might see them again. So I think it's really important for us to get all the information we can. And it looks like their ship is pretty much dead in the water. Didn't it look like that before when you first met them? Like,
Yep.
Weren't you just saying by any means necessary, reverse engines, full warp power? And now you're like, let's take a little look around.
Again, nothing in Star Trek can't be solved by doing a little poking around. Okay. Like, that's absolutely what Riker wants to do. This is the strongest reaction I've ever seen out of Guinan, where she's like, what? Didn't I tell you fools to not do that? And they're like, thanks, Guinan. If we need a Sumerian sunset, we'll call you. And then they storm out. And
we don't even know why we asked your opinion, because we had no intention of listening. See you later. So they go.
If Guinan is the only person who's had dealings with this Borg, maybe just put her in charge of the decisions for now. You don't know what you're dealing with, and she does. Like, what is the problem here? So they go onto the Borg cube, which again, that set design
is amazing. And you see the Borg alcoves, and they've got 2 Borg per alcove, which they change in the future to just being like 1, and they're not all sleeping all the time. Like, they change a lot of stuff about the Borg in the future, but I have to say they're really strong in the start. Like, just the everything, like the way it looks, the sets, the Borg being they're all regenerating, but the way that Data describes it is they are part of the whole ship. So they can't be read as individual life signs because they're like a part of the ship when they're plugged in. Yeah. That's just so cool. Like, all of that is very cool. And they realize that even though there's some Borg walking around, none of them are seeing the away team as a hostile force. They don't care that they're there. They have no reaction to them, which again makes the Borg really scary, because you're just like, wow, they don't even see us as a threat. So that means, how easily can they just destroy us then, when they're not scared, they're not worried, they're not reactive, they're not emotional. They're literally just doing their thing.
Yes. Riker refers to the Borg as a juggernaut. And I was like, okay, I am familiar with the term juggernaut from like the X-Men movies, but I was like, but I want to know what that actually really means. So I did just a very mini deep dive. And a juggernaut is a literal or metaphorical force regarded as merciless, destructive, and unstoppable. And that's exactly what the Borg are. That's exactly what they are. So in my notes in all caps, I wrote, so now will you get the hell out of there? Like, when is enough going to be enough for you to be like, this is a bad situation. We need to get out of here.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is no. They do not get out of there. They do a little more poking around, because they say, we want to interface with the main computer and get some more information. They end up finding themselves in a Borg nursery. This is another thing that changes with the Borg over time. They no longer birth children. Like in this scene, they're saying they must start off as biological, and the second that they're born, they get all these cybernetic implants, which would make sense, but like which is possible. But then you got to imagine that there's like Borg having sex and like pregnant Borg, and like that's not a thing. So later on they clarify, or they change this about the Borg, that the Borg actually reproduce, quote unquote, by assimilation. They take over other people, and that's how they get babies. If there are any babies in the planets or spaceships or whatever they take over, they take them, they assimilate them, and they put them into maturation chambers to make them grow like in a matter of months. Like in a few months, they go from baby, to adult. And that's why they only have adult drones. So they really take this idea of how the Borg procreate to another level as we move forward, but they haven't done that yet here. So here we have a little Borg nursery and a little baby Borg with little, a little head thing on his head. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of cute.
That is really adorable. That is really adorable. One of our listeners did send us a poll question, an informal poll saying, who's cuter, the baby Borg or baby Yoda from The Mandalorian? Which I voted baby Yoda, but I don't know if you've seen The Mandalorian yet, but I mean,
have
both
seen The Mandalorian. Baby Yoda's pretty cute, and he has superpowers, and baby Borg don't. So
yeah, they just cry.
It's not a fair contest.
It's very non-Star Trek of us for us to vote for a Star Wars thing, but whatever. So we have this amazing visual moment where the away team kind of steps to the edge of like the alcoves, and you just see this panning shot of the massive scale of the Borg cube. And it's absolutely tremendous in size. And you just see like thousands and thousands of Borg, like all just in stasis, as they're regenerating the ship. So they do realize like, wait a second, the ship is regenerating. And then now Picard realizes the danger, which I don't know why it took him this long, but he was like, okay, maximum warp, get the away team back onto the bridge and let's get the hell out of here. Start shooting photon torpedoes, which does nothing. And this is just terrifying.
Right. Because as soon as the Enterprise says, let's get out of here, the second they start flying away, the Borg cube starts chasing them. You're like, dang it. I wonder if they would have chased you if you would have left when Guinan said to leave, or if they would have just like focused on repairing their own ships. We will never know, because you guys stuck around until the ship was all back to normal. Ugh.
Way too long. Way too long.
Granted, you had no idea that they could do that. And you thought the ship was dead in the water. You had no idea they could actually fix their ship that fast. So I get that. But you should just listen to Guinan. Moral of the story.
Just listen to Guinan. I need a t-shirt or a bumper sticker that just says, just listen to Guinan, because she knows, Guinan knows. I love that visual when they're racing away from the cube and the cube is gaining on them. They magnify and you can see the ship kind of coming back together. And I was like, oh my God. Like, not only was it terrifying, but it was so cool as a viewer. My eyes like popped out of my head when I saw that. And I remember that even from the first time I watched it as a kid, I was like, this is incredible. So they're trying photon torpedoes, which do nothing. And that makes sense because they had used phasers before and it blasted a bunch of holes into the ship. But again, the Borg learn and adapt faster than anyone else we've encountered. So now even photon torpedoes are doing nothing. Meanwhile, Q pops in and is just lounging on the ground and just enjoying every second of this, practically eating his popcorn as Picard is getting more and more panicked. And they're like, we're losing shields, we're losing warp power, we're losing everything. And I love that Q is like, they will wear you down, wear you out. And when you have nothing left, then they will destroy you. There is no way to get out of this. You cannot destroy them. They'll regenerate. They'll keep coming out. Even if you destroy this cube, like another one will come. And Q's speech is so incredible, which again lends itself to that writing. Maurice Hurley absolutely nailed it, and his team. I'm sure it's not just one person. But I feel like this moment right here, when Q is like, no matter what you do, Picard, they will get you. This is the moment where TNG levels up in my mind. This is where I was like, now we're like a full force show. And I loved it. I absolutely loved that part.
Which leads Picard to start groveling in the most graceful way I've ever seen. I mean, he's just like, do you want me to say this? I'll say it. Do you want me to do this? I'll do it. But the way he does it, like, I don't know, like, he's desperate because they're all about to die. He's desperate and he's saying he's desperate, but the way that he caves and like asks for Q's help to me seemed so graceful and elegant. It seemed like it was coming out of strength. Like, we need your help. Help us.
Dignified.
It wasn't like, it was dignified. It wasn't just like, oh my God, we're all going to die. Like, get out of here. Help us, please. Like, it wasn't any of that. It was just like, yeah, we're in trouble and you can help us. Please help us. We need you. It was coming from this place of strength where I was like, I'm pretty impressed by how you sound dignified even when you're losing your crap.
I do love that. I appreciate when someone is wrong and they admit they're wrong with a position of strength and without like passive aggressive bullshit. He's like, you wanted us to be frightened? We're frightened. You wanted us to feel inadequate? We are inadequate. We need you, Q. Like, you have proven your point. So Q snaps them back to where they've started. And suddenly, the Borg are gone because, they're 7,000 light years behind them. And another brilliant piece of writing, Picard says, listen, I understand what you've done here, Q, but I think the lesson could have been learned without the loss of 18 members of my crew. And Q says, if you can't take a little bloody nose, maybe you ought to go back home and crawl under your bed. It's not safe out here. It's wondrous with treasures to satiate desires both subtle and gross, but it is not for the timid. And I was like, like my mind again. I was like, this writing is so good. It is so the opposite of like the Edo that are like, we're blonde. Let's have sex. Oh, okay. Let's not. Okay. Wait. Oh, everybody said, oh, wait, I don't know. Show's over. Thanks for coming. Like that, like episodes like that make no sense. But then you have this Q speech and you're like, dang. Also, for those of you who don't know, John Delancey is a Juilliard trained actor. So he has some serious acting bona fides, and absolutely, even though he plays like this impish jokester character, still can show like the depth of his danger that's like just under the surface. It's like, don't piss me off because I can destroy you and put you in situations where like you can come to real harm. And if you're going to like grovel over the loss of 18 members of your crew, like maybe you ought not be out here in the first place. It is dangerous.
Which was so not what I thought he was going to say. I thought he was going to just snap his fingers and put the 18 people back on the ship and also fix that big hole that we still have going through decks 18 through 27 or whatever, right? Like, that's what I thought he was going to do. But he was just like, hey, if you can't deal with it, maybe you should go home. I was like, that's kind of harsh, but also true, but also harsh. Like, you could literally snap and just put them back. Why are you like this, Q? That's how I was feeling.
I completely understand why Q did that, where he had tried to tell Picard and Riker, it's like, it's dangerous out here. You all are going, y'all are going much further and much faster than you ought to be, like based on the Q continuum's calculations. So you need to know that there are, you've met some Klingons and some Vulcans, like they're nothing compared to what is out there. And when Picard and Riker were very smugly like, we may not be ready for them, but we're ready to be discovered and we're ready to like meet them. It's like, okay, this is what you get. This is where consequences are real. And those poor 18 people died. And yes, you still have a big hole in your ship from the terraforming station laser drill. But this is like, he made his point that was like, they're dangerous. And I'm not just going to be around to like snap you back to survival at any given turn.
Okay, fair. And let me also point out that Q's the one who snapped them into danger in the first place.
True.
So they were just chilling, enjoying their day. And he pops up and says, I want asylum on your ship. I want to join you guys. And then Picard's like, no, we don't want you and we don't need you. And that's when Q is like, oh yeah, well, you don't know what's out there. I'm going to show you what's out there and show you how you need me. And so he kind of set up a situation where he put them in danger to rescue them from danger, to teach them a lesson about how they're in danger. Like, I don't know. Like everything he said, like, yes, I agree with you. And also he designed that entire scenario.
He really did. He did. He didn't create the Borg though for them.
No,
and even though Picard said, please tell me this is like one of your illusions or fantasies, he's like, no, this is very real. You want it to be discovered? You have been discovered. And now you're on your own. So, and truly, I mean, Q was there to snap them back at the end. And my God, did I love how like relaxed and how much he was enjoying watching them like sweat bullets. He's like, let me just lounge on the bridge, sip my tea, like just watch them struggle and panic, knowing he could just snap them back. So Q leaves and they set course for the nearest starbase. I feel like at this point, we need to set up mass therapy for everyone on the ship because that was horrifying. But they're like, set course for starbase 175 or whatever. I was like, oh, okay. Just business as usual. But we have this lovely little like ending scene where Guinan and Picard are playing their space chess. And Guinan warns Picard that Q set a series of events into motion that brought humans into contact with the Borg before they were ready. And she says, now that they're aware of your existence, and kind of leaves that hanging. And Picard goes, oh, they'll be coming, won't they? And I was like, oh my God. Like the chill factor for me was so real. And in true Picard fashion, he's like, maybe Q did the wrong thing for the right reason. Like he gave us a kick to our complacency to prepare us for what's out there. Although, it cost 18 people their lives and a piece of the ship, but now the Borg know about you and they will be coming. And I was like, oh my God, like I wanted to throw up a little bit. It was really scary. It was so scary.
I was thinking they were 2 years away, which is, again, to me, with the Voyager perspective, not that far away. So I'm like, in 2 years, I feel like their technology will still not be good enough to face the Borg, because even as the Borg come back and come back and come back and come back and come back, they're never ready to face the Borg. They just always like narrowly escape, or the Borg Queen lets them go to like build some kind of alliance. But they're never ready for the Borg. Like the Borg are just always far superior because who knows why? Maybe because they're technological, maybe because they're heartless. Who knows why? But they've got a lot of strengths going for them to where, I mean, even if you wait, you're still going to be screwed when you see them again. Like when we see them over and over, even in TNG, they're always terrifying and they're always unbeatable.
Yes. And I think that's what makes them, in my mind, like the best Star Trek villains, hands down. You can always find something to give the other races. Like the Ferengi, they want like money, or the Klingons, they want, glory or whatever, right? Like you can always find something to give them to satiate them. And there is nothing you can give the Borg. And that's terrifying. And that's what makes this episode, for me, I would say top 3. I honestly think this is one of the best TNG episodes in the entire series because of just like, not only the writing, the set and costume design, but the idea overall of like introducing them to this super villain force that they can't defeat. And then now they're like, oh crap. Like it's a fabulous episode. Unfortunately, next week we're jumping into like a dumb episode. So again, it's still season 2 where it's like, this one's brilliant. This one's not so great. But before we talk about that, do you have any final thoughts on this episode, Shereese?
We talked about before how we want those "Where Are They Now" episodes for a lot of the characters where we're like, man, what happened to this planet, or what happened to those people, or whatever. This, I'm glad to say, is we do get lots of, I won't say closure, but we do get lots and lots of to be continueds with the Borg, which I'm really excited about, because I feel like each time we have an episode with them, you always learn something new, and you're always like, how are they going to get out of this? And it's just always from a storytelling perspective, it's always a good time.
That is always good. It's always good when the Borg show up. The only "Where Are They Now" that I'm interested in for this episode is, where is the Borg stained carpet? Where is that? Is it in like I'm imagining some like Indiana Jones final scene, where it's just rows and rows of boxes of just different stained TNG carpets. But Shereese, I say this every time, but one of the highlights of my week is nerding out with you about Star Trek: The Next Generation. I love doing it with you. Thank you for geeking out with me. Of
course. This is so much fun. What's up for us next week?
Next week, we're talking season 2, episode 17, entitled Samaritan Snare. So thanks for nerding out with us, everyone. We will see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.